Okay, welcome along everyone to the latest CILIPS Scotland online learning or autumn gatherings event, and this one is Emerging Leaders. My name is Sean McNamara. I'm head of CILIP in Scotland, and we've also got Kirsty McQuarrie here, who is the CILIPS membership officer, and we'll be here facilitating the event today, and I hope you're all doing well. Anyone who's just joined, feel free to say hello in the chat and introduce yourself. I'll be keeping introductions fairly short today because we've got quite a lot to get through, but I'll go over a couple of brief housekeeping points before we start. When we're going through the day, if you do want to turn your camera on, you're more than welcome to. But if you can, just keep yourself muted if possible, because it just saves for any background noise. If you want to keep your camera off, that's also fine as well. But feel free to do so. We'll be using the chat function mostly for interactions. So if you do have questions at any point during any of the presentations, then please just put them in the chat. If you can't view before it, then that would be great, because that will just allow us to pick it up as a question if possible. Other than that, you know, if you do want to raise a hand and ask, then please do, and we will keep an eye on that as we go. We have the captions enabled at the moment, so you should be seeing captions, but you can turn them off, I think, using your settings at the bottom if they are getting in the way for you at all. But they are available, and hopefully that will help any of you that need them. If you have any other technical problems, please just put it in the chat or send Kirsten or I a direct message on the chat, and we'll be happy to help. So we have a full room of people. I think we might have a room full of students from Strathclyde University. I'm not sure if you're there. Say hello in the chat if you are here, and hopefully you enjoy it if so. Okay, we're going to kick off then. So the first speaker we're delighted to welcome from Leeds, from the University of Leeds, is Masud Khokhar, who's University Librarian and Keeper of the Brotherton Collection. Masud oversees all developments for the libraries and galleries, a computer scientist by education and with libraries in his DNA. Masud is passionate about digital leadership and innovation in the changing library and archive environments. His core interests cut across the topics of strategy development, digital technologies, innovation, open research, leadership, staff empowerment, and talent realisation. And some of those latter ones, I think, particularly will be coming into this talk, which is about leadership in libraries. So Masud, welcome along. If you're happy to, please go ahead and share your slides just now, and just please take it away when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And firstly, what a real privilege to be amongst colleagues talking about my own personal journey, but also thank you for the invitation. And I feel like after that introduction, I'm going to disappoint you all. So I hope that's not going to be the case. So as Sean mentioned, I have joined the University of Leeds as the University Librarian and Keeper of Brotherton Collection in April 2021. And before that, I was in different roles. But what I'll try to do today is speak for about 15 minutes. I'd like to keep it there because I'm really keen that we have a bit more conversation, a bit more talk about some of these aspects. But I thought I'll put my contact details in there. If you need to get in touch with me about any of these things later on, please don't hesitate. Right, so starting today's conversation. So I thought I'll talk a little bit about myself and my leadership journey and highlight some of the key things within that leadership journey, particularly leadership lessons that I learned and how I developed myself as a leader through those challenges, opportunities, and sometimes a bit of both. But I will also talk a little bit about how my life and my career was shaped by not being hesitant in seeking support, guidance, and help, and also some tips and tricks for application and interview processes as well. So it's a little bit of a mix and match kind of arrangement, but recognizing that people in this forum would be at different levels of their own leadership journey, I thought I'll mention a few of these things at the same time. So as Sean said, libraries were not my career choice. That's why the title is Hello from an Accidental Librarian. But they do run in my DNA. My grandfather was an English teacher and a school librarian. My father was the National Librarian of Pakistan. He retired in that position. And when I was 13, he took me to the National Library and he asked me to just be inspired by that. And actually, it had a counter impact, and I realized this is quite boring. I would actually rather do something different. And one of those things was a shiny little box in a corner, very new to computers at that time. And that caught my attention. And I really wanted to understand how computers work, how they can help our life, etc. And therefore, my career started in computing from that point onwards. And in 2006, I came to UK to do my PhD. I was at the University of Birmingham for my first year. And in 2007, I moved to Oxford. And libraries enter in my world since childhood. Now, there is a really interesting reason here, which is when I moved to Oxford, I never thought I would work in a library. I was thinking, okay, I need to do some part-time work. I can't afford to live in a very expensive city like Oxford otherwise. Where should I go? And it was purely, I was looking at retail, and ultimately I ended up in a library job and started working as a bookshelver and an information assistant on the front desk. And one lesson I learned in that journey was to never say never to any option or opportunity, because life can surprise you at times. And that just chance encounter actually changed my whole mindset about academia and what kind of career path I want to take and what kind of opportunities exist in libraries. So just to illustrate that point a bit, I was in my year 3 of my PhD or my DPhil in Oxford, and I decided that actually I'm enjoying my work in libraries so much, and there's so much opportunity in libraries to think digitally that's not yet been used, that I would rather fulfill my passion for higher education through the professional services route rather than the academic route. And just that encounter made me make such a big decision in my life. In 2010, building on that decision, I got my first full-time job, a real job, because before there was all part-time kind of roles. And I also learned about allyship for the first time there. And just to illustrate that point, I was going through a visa change at that time, because as a student, you could only work a certain number of hours, and I was going through a different visa. And Oxford really needed someone to start working on their system straight away. And generally in those kind of roles, you have, at least at that time, a month's notice. And they waited for me for about 7 months. And I didn't realize at that time why they were so kind and so supportive. And it was only later on I realized that actually it was the head of the service who I met while having a coffee rather than in the interview process, and just sparked a little conversation with him, who really supported my application and basically pushed the place to hold off. And I then later on realized by conversations that sometimes it's the chance encounters and the chance conversations that can really build your profile and your impression in a way that your interview process might not. So basically, treat everyone with the kind of knowledge and respect that needs to be delivered for that experience. What I also found was actually digital was a great common enabler for my learning, because it cut across everything. It cuts across cataloging to how different systems do digital access, to e-resources, to repositories, to pretty much anything you name. And I had absolutely no expertise in those areas, but I had hunger. And I actually went and spoke with all those people and said, tell me how cataloging works. I'm not a librarian. I had no clue about cataloging. I had no idea about what Mark 245 is or Mark 09 fields, but they're obsolete now, etc., etc. So I was trying to think about those kind of things and trying to learn as much. Things like copy-specific notes I learned for the first time just by having conversations. So one of the lessons in that journey that I learned was have a growth mindset and be hungry for new knowledge and share ideas. And I think there are two aspects in there. One is to learn, but then also not hesitate to say things out loud where you can make a difference, where you can do something more effectively. Because in that leadership journey, you could be an enabler, you could be a fixer, or you could also be considered as a thinker. And for a leader, you kind of need to have, especially on that journey, you kind of need to have all of those aspects around you. You may want to fix certain things to begin with to build your profile, but you don't want to be just associated as someone who fixes problems. You also want to start building on that journey as someone who can think differently, who can think strategically, who can bring new ideas to the table, etc. So don't hesitate in sharing your thoughts and your ideas. That's really critical in that journey. Between 2010 to 2013, I had a love and frustration relationship with Oxford, particularly because I was feeling like a lot of stress, but without any major responsibility. I was thinking, something's not right here, because I feel like I'm taking the burden of a lot of these things. So while digital allowed me to really understand a lot of areas, it also made me feel that I'm responsible for a lot of these areas, rightly or wrongly so. Wrongly so if I look in hindsight. But that was how I was feeling at that time. And also, your personal life encounters also make a difference. So Oxford was very expensive. We couldn't really, both my wife and I were working full time, and we didn't save a single penny, basically. And we're thinking, that's not right. So I actually did, in my journey, a sideways move. And I moved from a team where I was responsible for all major systems of Oxford and thinking enterprise architecture and working with a team of like 20 or 30 people into a very small team of 3, into the Said Business School Library, the Sainsbury Library, where I was only looking after their repositories infrastructure and digital ideas in general. And ultimately, that sideways move only lasted for about 7 or 8 months, primarily because my wife found a different job for me near in Lancaster, where her family is. But also because that sideways move was helpful in just knowing your own limits and recognizing where you are at any particular stage in your life in terms of responsibility versus stress. As I mentioned, in 2013, I discovered a role at Lancaster University Library through my wife. She's from Lancashire, so she was very keen to move up north. And the role was head of digital innovation to begin with, and eventually also became head of digital innovation and research. And it was my first proper leadership role. I was full of enthusiasm and optimism. I came in, I said, I want to be a great leader. Tell me about all of your leadership programs. How can I make that happen? And I applied for their flagship leadership program. And the response I got was, you're not ready for this. You really need to go through a management development program before we can really develop you as a leader. And that was really heartbreaking at that time for me, if I'm honest, because I was like, oh, well, I'm coming with all this enthusiasm. But one of the other lessons of leadership is patience and perseverance. And I said, okay, if that's the route, then I'll go through management development program. I built my profile. I was thrown in the deep end. And actually throwing in the deep end could be a really challenging and rewarding time at the same time. And what I did was I grasped that opportunity. I said, I'll quickly develop my profile through this. And one of the biggest or the most important lessons I say to people is be an optimist. Leadership, you have to be an optimist. If you're a pessimist, that just flows through the whole organization that you're leading or the whole unit you're leading. People are looking at you for that optimism, for that hope for future. Be realistic, don't build false hopes, but be on the glass half full side rather than the glass half empty side. 2017 to 18, major life incidents happened. So in 2017, my son was born, and he's, I think, around 1.5 to 2 over here, I think, in this picture. We had to rehome our cats in a different home purely because my wife became severely allergic to them during pregnancy, and that never went away. And I had my very first directorship role. And there's a huge amount of responsibility and accountability that comes with that. And recognizing that and feeling the burden of that was very, very interesting. But the lesson I often talk about is you can't usually be an authentic leader if you don't bring your whole self to work. What's happening at your home impacts your work, and what's happening at your work also impacts your home. And I think people sometimes are on one side of the fence or the other, whether you can really distance your work from your home, and some people can do that really, really well. And kudos to them. I'm not one of them. In fact, most leaders that I know of in the libraries world are also not one of those. And there's also a strange sense of liberation that comes with just accepting that and saying, okay, if I'm having a crappy day, that's okay. And I can deal with it later. And then 2018 was the first time I became a director. And one of the, I've got some blog posts around this, which I can share. It's not an easy transition from being an associate director or a head of role to a director. And sometimes you're stuck in slightly different mindsets. And one of the most difficult transition I had to make, but thankfully my boss was very supportive in that, is how to manage finances, because I was still thinking about it from a very home budget mindset, a starvation budget mindset, rather than actually that's going to hinder innovation, that's going to hinder progression, etc. And there was a very different mindset that I had to really bring on that very, very quickly. And then the challenge I faced at Leeds is the scale challenge. It's just big and massive. So how do you traverse a kind of organization which is so big that it's got so many different silos? And more importantly, how do you realize that you can't fix all of this? And actually, what are your circles of influence in that? And how do you directly influence something? And how do you indirectly influence something? There's a whole middle section which I'm not going to talk about, which is what happens during the pandemic and how your leadership styles change, more from a collaborative servant leadership mode to more of a directive leadership mode. I can do a whole conversation on that at some other time. But the other thing I would highlight in there is at senior levels, your external profile is as important as your internal knowledge and profile. So how you're recognized across the sector, what initiatives you're part of, what do people think of you in that regard, etc. So some tips and tricks that I think I would like to highlight. On leadership, you are your biggest ally. You will need to push yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Seek as much support as you need, but you will need to trigger that. I had, when I was starting on that journey, 2 internal mentors, 2 external mentors. When I got a bit more established, I had 1 internal mentor, 1 external mentor, and a coach. I currently still have 1 external mentor, 1 internal mentor, and 1 coach. And I cannot just highlight the importance of how that made a difference in my life. Be prepared for the change in your success definition. There's a huge amount of gratification that comes with solving something and enjoying the job that you do. But for moving into leadership, you need to also start thinking about how your success definition might change to getting the same achievements out of others, because you really are a master of nothing the more further up you go in leadership. I will absolutely have no clue about different things, and I have to let go of things I'm passionate about as well, just because I think it's more important to enable and empower everyone else and achieve success through them. Ask for opportunities. One of the best lessons I learned in my life is if you don't ask, you'll never get. If you ask, you may not get. But if you don't ask, you'll never get. So if there is training, if there's development, if there's visits, if there's anything you think which will help you develop, ask for it. And build allies who will talk positively about you in right places when you're not there. That is critical because lots of people will be nice in front of you. Most important thing is, do you have the right allies who will talk positively about you in places that will help you succeed? And that's not easy, but it's a really critical thing and often a forgotten thing in how you build yourself as a leader. And some tips and tricks in terms of jobs. So one of the key things I say is don't think of the job as a whole, but just think of it as one single step at a time. Your first focus should be how you're writing your application, how you're writing your supporting statement, how you're writing your cover letter, depending on their ask. And market yourself. Your cover letters and your supporting statements are really important. I was recently speaking with a colleague who thought the CV was the most important thing. And I was like, no, generally speaking, most people will try to assess you through your cover letter and supporting statement. It is only if they can't get anything from that they'll go to the CV. And if they're having to do that, they've already kind of made a mental impression of you've not been able to communicate or market yourself effectively. So cover letters and supporting statements are really important. And within that, know the system. Your first focus should be to sell yourself or market yourself in a way that you get shortlisted. And for those who are familiar with systems, at least in higher education, Stonefish is a very common system. If you're using a supporting statement, just focus on what that's asking, because that's how people mark you in that system. So knowing the systems can really help as well. Ask for help from similar and different thinkers to yourself. So I mentioned the 2 external mentors. When I was applying for leadership roles, I sent them my cover letters and said, can you tell me what you think about this? And I got very interesting and different kind of comments from both. And then I accommodated them based on my authentic self. So that gives you a different perspective, but you still remain authentic to yourself. And I think asking for help is really important. And practice presentations and interviews, really critical. I've practiced my presentation, I think 22 times when I was interviewing for leads, just to get everything right in my mind. It's not over practicing, it's just to make sure that I'm slightly tweaking it, slightly differing it. But the reason why I did it 22 times was to build my own confidence rather than anything else. And that was really good for me. Interviews, I'm so practiced now that I don't really practice as much, but if you're in the early stages of that journey, go for that. I don't know why the order of these bullet points has changed, but research the organization and the job and build a connection. So one of the mistakes I was doing when I was applying for York, for example, was I thought, okay, I'll just apply and I won't speak with my boss at that time. And one of my mentors said, absolutely not. Even if you just want to say hello, you build that connection before you apply, because they want to seek your mental picture and connection and marketability before the application scene. And it's about refocusing and re-emphasizing your connections again and again in that journey. I think that's all I wanted to say. I know there isn't much time, but I really wanted to hear more thoughts from you, ideas, comments, suggestions, anything that I've said that you resonates with you, anything that doesn't resonate with you. I think that's also important. So very happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Masud. That was really, really informative. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot too, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that, and so many tips in there that sound just that are so good to know, particularly around job applications and other things. We've got a few minutes. If anyone has a question, please put it in the chat or raise your hand if you would like to. I've got just a question just to kick things off while people are having a think there. So, in terms of mentorship, we've got our own mentorship programs in CILIPS Scotland and CILIP, but if you're not relying on a sort of set up program, and you said you've got some coaches and mentors, what tips would you give to people in terms of approaching somebody who they may not know or and they may admire, but they would like them to be a mentor? I mean, how do you go about that? Do you think, is it always something you find you get a positive response from if you ask people, or is there any tips around that?
I know it sounds strange, but be shameless. Because what's the worst that can happen? Someone will say no, or someone will say, I'm very busy, maybe later. And I've said to a few people, not at this time, but maybe in 6 months' time when I'm mentoring less people, etc. But the key critical thing there is, if you don't ask, you'll never get an aspect. The other thing I would say is, not all of my mentor relationships have been great. There have been mentoring relationships where after a few months I've realized it's not really resulting in anything I wanted to achieve. And that's okay. And you can be very honest with someone and say, or always start with a 3-month contract or a 6-month contract on that note, so you've got an exit anyway. But personally, if you think that you have a personality match with someone and you can learn from someone, or if you've seen them speak somewhere and something's clicked and you're like, oh, yeah, that really works for me or resonates with me, just be shameless and ask them. There's absolutely no issue in that.
Excellent advice, thank you. We've just got a question here. The importance of being a thinker to leadership. What sort of sources do your new ideas come from? With library and information being such a multidisciplinary field, I know lots of people can find it tricky to negotiate it's jumped out my screen. Negotiate the sheer volume of information out there. So yeah, when looking for new ideas, do you have any advice on the sources that you would look for?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that you can't know everything about everything. That's impossible. The cognitive overload would be so high that you'll actually not be able to build any kind of profile in any particular area. What I would always recommend is pick 1 or 2 areas that you are really passionate about. Digital was mine. I was very passionate about digital, and I was very passionate about research data. So those are the 2 key areas. And then you read more about that, you speak with people in those areas, you're open to learning, and you talk about it. And generally speaking, your profile starts building, and he or she they are very fantastic in this particular field. And then you build on that. What's the next step? So from research data, I start building about reputation on open research, just more widely, open access, open research, what's happening in that domain. And as you go through and traverse through that journey yourself, you will start building your own confidence and your own recognition of what you can achieve and what you can't achieve in terms of that knowledge gathering. But reading is helpful. Library journals can be helpful. I didn't always use library journals. I was read a lot of blog posts. Think cross-country is the other thing I would say. A lot of my learning is actually coming in often from what's happening in Australia, US, less so from Europe, and UK. I'm so well connected. I'm mostly aware of what's happening. So think wider than the UK sector as well, or Scottish sector particularly.
Thank you. Comment from Kimberly, just particularly like the point about asking opinions from those that think differently to yourself, which yeah, absolutely would agree with. And another just question from Katrina. So how much of the required skills do you need to have sorted before you start? And this is in terms of leadership, I think. And how much can you learn as you go? Is there anything that above anything else you think you need to know to have understood before moving into leadership, or do you pick it up once you get there?
The only real skill that you need is common sense and the ability to ask other about, I don't know the answer, can you help? It's really interesting because there's a lot of research done on what makes a good leader, and are you born a leader, or can you be a leader, or can you learn how to be a leader? There's a lot of research also on how men and women feel differently about how much do I believe in something versus how much do I tick the boxes and can just go ahead and do this. My absolute honest answer on this would be just go for it if you feel right about it. There's a huge amount of learning that happens on the job. You want to find a good boss in that journey rather than ideally you want to find a good boss and a good organization, but you can be part of a good organization but with a not so good boss, and that can really deter you from actually being part of the leadership journey. It's slightly painful to say, but at least what's happening in the leadership in the broader context nationally doesn't really bode any confidence in leadership. And that's not the kind of standard you want to achieve in terms of leadership journeys. I think it's about common sense. Listening is the most important skill, and evaluating situations, understanding the kind of cost benefits, risk versus outcomes, etc. And that's, again, very natural, comes with experience. Just go for it. Don't hesitate is what I would say.
Thank you. And yes, good advice. Don't necessarily look to Westminster for any leadership advice at the moment. Yeah, thank you. A couple of points just from my colleague Kirsten there, just saying CILIPS Professional Development Fund. If you are one of the attendees who is based in Scotland, you are able to apply for that to get funding for events. And obviously anywhere you're based, you can get access to a lot of journals to your CILIP membership. So the links are in the chat. I think that's all the question we have, and we are just about to hit 1:30. So can I just ask everyone to please say thank you to Masud, either with the reactions or on camera, but and huge thanks from me, Masud. That was really helpful, and thank you so much. We really appreciate your time on this. So yeah, thanks again. I know you can't stay after this, so thank you for joining us, and we'll be in touch again in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Lovely to see you all, and I hope you have a really good rest of the session. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our second presentation, or it's a couple of presentations joined together. So we are going to have Cleo Jones in a moment, and I'll introduce Cleo in a second. But before we do that, my colleague Kirsten is going to do a short presentation based around our student and new professionals community, and we'll tell you a bit more about that for anyone who, again, is based in Scotland or even further afield and would like to access some of the services that they offer. So Kirsten, I will now just pass to you, and please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Oh, I'm feeling inspired now. I hope everybody else is as well. So we're going to be hearing from our amazing immediate past president, Cleo Jones, very soon indeed. But just wanted to highlight briefly the fact that this whole session was the innovation and inspired by CILIPS students and new professionals community. So as you can see, this presentation was put together by their wonderful events coordinator and social media officer, Elizabeth. So I hope I can do them justice and inspire you to learn more about them. I was quite proud of myself for having practiced this twice, but now I think 22 is the gold standard, but hopefully it'll still give you a flavour of everything that SNPC has to offer. So who are SMPC? They're a community for everyone who's new or newish to working and studying in the library and information world. They offer an invaluable network, a source of connection and vital peer support, which is, as we know, ever more important now as we kind of come out of the pandemic context. They offer a wide range of events from inspiring sessions like today's to in professional development to also regular social events that help newer professionals network, get together. They've got some very exciting plans for Christmas, so do stay tuned for that. And above all, it's a space to share your experiences and what matters most to you as the emerging leaders of our sector. So one of the ways, here we can see the wonderful committee themselves. So you can get an idea of the roles that are out there, and the committee is currently open for vacancies. So if any of our students who are watching, any of our new professionals would like to gain that really wonderful experience of being part of a committee, of teamwork, of organising events and supporting the sector, then please do get in touch. The contact details are going to be at the end of these slides. A wonderful way in which SMPC really amplify the voices of new professionals is through their New Voices blog. That is on the CILIPS website. I'll pop the link in the chat shortly, and it's a space for new pros to share your perspectives. You can follow the case study template if you wish, or write about whatever matters most to you. So please do check it out. We would love to make your voices heard through the CILIPS website. And again, when we're thinking of CVs, it's an ideal opportunity to get published and show your engagement with the wider sector too. And of course, events like today's wonderful session, SMPC run a really broad, exciting range of events. And even the pandemic didn't stop them. You can see here their online careers workshop with Heather Marshall, our chair of trustees in 2020. And they've covered everything from applications, interviews like today, bookish quizzes. Fair warning, they are very tough. It's a real success if I manage to get into double figures with my points, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity to network and meet people that you wouldn't otherwise encounter. And the recordings of their events are often also available on CILIPS YouTube. So again, if you subscribe to our channel, if you follow the links I'll include shortly, you'll be able to catch up with all of SMPC's wonderful activities as well. And they also do a lot of great work on chartership, on professional registration, and the difference it can make to your career. So please do say hello. You can find SMPC at the handle here on Twitter. Also make sure that you're following hashtag SMPC job alerts. They're highlighting job vacancies across the UK and beyond. So it's really your first port of call. If you're at the point where you're looking for a vacancy, then I would highly recommend following that hashtag. And just generally, they offer training opportunities, events that will be of interest. If you're at the stage of sharing research or dissertation surveys, also send them a message. They'd be more than happy to amplify that call out and in any way they can to celebrate your achievements and experiences as new professionals in the sector. And last but certainly not least is SMPC's collection of useful resources, which I think really forms the foundation for today's event. So they have a hub of resources. I'll pop the link in the chat in a moment, learning about the list landscape, where to look for jobs, useful documents and strategies that you want to be aware of as you're entering or emerging into the sector, funding options like we've already discussed, and other important organisations to know. And they also have a wonderful collection of interview tips and techniques, which I've no doubt whatsoever that this session will be adding to. So before I hand over to Cleo, just to share SMPC's details, they would love to hear from you on Twitter, by email, or you can join their mailing list. So please don't hesitate to get in touch and be part of that community as you begin your journey as an emerging leader. And on that note, I will stop sharing my screen. And then whenever you're ready, Cleo, I will hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten, and that's brilliant. And just to say, if anyone has any questions at all about the SMPC, please do put them in chat, and we'll come to them after that. So yeah, Cleo, just while you're sharing your screen, I think that I'll just give you a quick intro. Cleo is a senior library manager with a background in schools and children's libraries, currently lifelong learning strategic manager for the City of Edinburgh Council, and has a wide remit including children's schools.
You'll leave before it gets worse.
And mobile libraries. Cleo was CILIPS president in 2021. So Cleo, I can see your slides there, so thank you, and please take it away.
Okay, well, I've been totally inspired, and I now feel I'm in this very, very tiny niche because I remember offering to do this at the autumn gathering a year ago, when we had folk speaking about different opportunities and to don't pigeonhole yourself and that kind of thing. And I remember thinking, I really need to tell people about how things to do with interviews and why it's important. So that's really why I'm here today. And it does feel very niche, and I would love to talk about bigger picture things, but I am very particularly talking today about getting that interview, preparing for that interview, and things that you might think about interviews. And really it is all based on my experience of being an interviewer and an interviewee. And I think I have now been 33 years working in libraries, so I've done quite a bit of both, actually. So I'll talk about preparing for the interview. I'll talk about competency-based interviews. Now, certainly in Scotland and in local authorities, we've all been using competency-based interviews for a really, really long time, and we still are. Personally, I hope that changes, because I don't actually necessarily think it is the best. And what I'm going to tell you today, in the world's most boring presentation, but it's just things in my head, is what that means for you and what you've got to do and how you've got to put that together. And then also some etiquette and tips and things like that. So yeah, having been an interviewee without any knowledge at all, just starting off and going to interviews, what that was like. And being the interviewer, doing training that we do, say, in local authorities, and also being reviewed. So 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we went through a big review and all of our jobs changed. So we were all, all of our jobs disappeared, and there were new jobs which you had to apply for, which were at the same scale, but there weren't enough jobs for people. So it was quite a stressful time. And having worked for the same council for, at that point, about 14, 15 years, and having been for a number of interviews, a few of which I'd been successful, but in the more recent years that I had been going, I definitely knew I wasn't doing the right thing. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And I was actually interviewing people on a competency basis, so I didn't know what I was doing wrong. So this really is, take it from a very experienced old lag interviewee and interviewer, that when we got to this point and people were really, really stressed about these interviews, they actually told us a lot of things about the expectations of what happens during a competency-based interview, which I'm hoping will be really, really useful for me, and you don't have to wait about 25 years to actually put this into action or realize that you're not doing the right thing, which is what happened to me. So now, obviously, I've got this knowledge, and what's very, very irritating and annoying to me, and I feel terrible for a candidate, is someone on paper looks absolutely fabulous. We have leated them. They've come in. We've said it's a competency-based interview, but obviously where they're working at the moment, they haven't had any experience of that. So you say it's a competency-based interview, and they nod at you as if they know what a competency-based interview is, but then they don't give you what you need for a competency-based interview. And honestly, it's been, the other thing is, knowing what a competency-based interview is means that you can really, really think that through, and therefore you're all ready when it comes to that. So hopefully this will really help those of you who are looking to move up a bit, or even get into your first job. And as I say, I don't advocate competency-based interviews. It's just, for most of us in local authorities, this is what we're doing. I personally find it actually quite difficult, and I think there are better ways of doing it, but this is what we've done. So, interview invite. Someone else can do your CV with you, someone else can do all of that. I'm sure you'll do a good thing, but this is the bit where people don't then tell you. So you have got an interview. They say to you, you've got an interview. Well done, right? If you got the interview, you're not there to make up numbers. You are there because your application has got you the interview, right? So You've already met their criteria. They've been going through and they've seen that you've got on the essential what is essential. You may be missing one or two and you've got some of the desirable, right? People do not waste their time thinking, well, let's just see one or two other people. You know, having worked with a lot of other people, I actually probably, because I do like, so I have taken the, you know, person who's worked in a library, but who's also been a goat herd. Someone wants to have been a goat herd. I actually quite like the ones who've got slightly different, and I'm a bit sort of left field, and I like sort of taking other people, but you've got to have those basic things. So you have got this interview because you are able to get this job. So keep that in mind. You would not be being interviewed if you weren't. That's a really, really strong thing to say. You've got your foot in the door. You now need to show what it is that you're doing. So do that research, the employer organization, get to know a bit about it, feel confident so that you can actually talk about it or chat about it or be a bit knowledgeable at interview. Also make sure that you know any strategies. So in Scotland, obviously that's our national library strategy, any performance indicators that are about. And obviously it's a bit different if you're working in a public library, because that is our national strategy and that will be Higgiopals. But so many library opportunities are not like that. You're not actually working within a bigger library environment. You're working within another organization. So make sure that you can kind of still talk about different strategies and then how libraries work towards it and how you've been working towards that. So please make sure that you are, so for example, school libraries, yes, you'll talk about vibrant and thriving, you'll have had a look at that, but you also want to show that you know how good is our school so that you've got an understanding of that. So do your bit of homework, get your paperwork in order. Right, so I've done this, right? I'm just showing you the stupid things I've done. I've like, right, okay, what am I doing? And I'll start to think about that. Make sure you have got the job description, the person specification, and your completed application, and look at all of that stuff. Make sure that where it says that it's essential, that you are thinking about demonstrating those things that have got you the interview. They've ticked the box to get you the interview. Now you're going to need to, when you're in the interview, do and exhibit those things which are the essential skills. So double check exactly what the invitation to the interview says. What is it going to be? What is it going to consist of? So make sure you're absolutely prepared and aware of what you're going to go into. So is it going to be a tour first? Are you then going to be interviewed? Will there be a presentation? So get all of that right in your head. And so you've got a kind of idea of what's going on. And as I say, know what the essential skills are. So if that's not clear, if it's not clear from the invitation, then please contact and check. There is nothing worse than thinking it's going to be one thing. I actually had gone, and they had forgotten to put it on. They hadn't said that it was a presentation, and I should have, because I thought that's a bit odd for the level of job, but they hadn't said that. And then on the day, they said to me, where's your presentation? And I just about died, and I was so absolutely floored that it, so you absolutely need to know what that interview process is going to be like. And as I say, get there to look to see that you get those essential skills, because you're going to reference those in your answers, right? So you're going to think those are the essential skills, and my answers are going to be, and I can prep those in advance. So if it's going to be an interview time of 30 to 40 minutes, a standard interview, I would think that you're going to be talking about a minimum of 4 questions, much more likely to be 5 or 6 questions. So kind of have that on your head. It feels actually a little bit like doing exam technique, prepare, and there are going to be about 6, so that you understand that. Now, common interview assumptions, right? Not just what I've said, other people. So when I've given feedback, other people have said, oh, but I didn't think to tell you that because I'd put it in my application form. So they assume that you are going back to that application form and really looking at it. And I can tell you that if we are, say, interviewing 10 people for one post and we're doing it over 2 days, what we'll do is we'll be scoring, because they actually are sitting there with a sheet and scoring. So be aware of that. You'll probably see them doing it. But we would only go back to that application if we had the top people came out and the scoring was exactly the same. If the scoring is exactly the same at that point, you go back to the application form and you check to see in that application form if there is anything which makes one candidate slightly stronger than the other, because at the interview process, they've come up the same. So please do not think that anything that you've put in that application will be imprinted on the interviewer's brain, because it absolutely won't. So don't think like that. Be prepared to tell anything that you want them to know. You're going to have to say it in that interview. So it's, you know, people honestly believe that it is a really hard thing to do, to prepare answers for questions. And a bit like many years ago when I was a school librarian and trying to help kids with exams, you know, really it isn't. There is a way that you can do that. So you need to think about what those questions are going to be and how they link to the essential and the desirable skills that have been on the job description and the person specification. So you need to think, I need to be evidencing that I have those essential skills, and hopefully some of the desirable, which are the ones above that as well. You need to think that your answer is going to be about 5 minutes maximum. So think about that and think about timing when you're practicing, time it. So even though you're not sure what the questions are going to be, you can get a really good idea of the kind of skill sets that they're looking for. So I've put down there, prepare your answers in skill sets. So for example, you're often asked about when you've worked as part of a team. You're often asked about, tell us about a challenging service user. You've sometimes asked something about being a reflective practitioner. Tell us about a time that you did a piece of work that you knew you could do better after you'd completed it. Developing a quality service. Tell us about something that you did that gave you feedback that you were then able to go on and improve more. And also change management. So there are lots and lots of skill sets that you have that you're trying to think about. And if you think about the ones that could come up and then kind of think how they're going to be. So these are the core competency currently for Edinburgh City Council, and I would imagine that it's pretty much the same if it's any other local authority. So we've got being customer focused, working effectively with others, managing change, taking ownership and responsibility, communicating effectively, and planning and decision making. And that is for any job in the council. These are our core competencies, not just library. These are any job. So you know that if you're going in with an organisation where you're told it's a competency based, that these are the kind of things that are going to come up. So you can almost prep, you know, something that you did for your service users. So that's your customer focus. How have I worked in a team? How have I worked in partnership? How have I done when there's something, you know, through change? What did I do? Showing your own ownership and responsibility, the part that you've played in something is really important. How do you communicate? What things have you done? And difficult sometimes, I think, for folks at the start of the career, the planning and decision making. Those are the competencies that we're looking for at library advisor level, right? So entry point right the way through. If you are going for a job where there is any kind of managerial or leading people, then these are the additional 3 that we would be looking for, which is leading others, managing performance, and political sensitivity. So those are all of the competencies, all of which you're going to be looking for any job, and then adding to the other ones, you're thinking about these three here. So these are just what we get in the council. You can write your own questions, but they have a great big list, and these are not for just librarians. So you can think through, and if you don't have much of a library background, or you don't have a lot of work experience, you worked in another sector and then you moved into libraries, you know, that's absolutely fine. You can basically use anything, any experience, if you feel it's relevant. So for example, these are questions that have been taken from some of our interviews. So describe a situation where you've improved a service. How did you go about it? What was challenging? So you're thinking about, right, okay, that's being customer focused, changing service, finding things out. Give us an example of how you've worked collaboratively with colleagues or colleagues from a different team. What was your role, right? And what were the challenges? Planning and decision making. Tell us about your planning, your formal planning. How do you do that? And can you give us examples of when you have done it? Describe an occasion when you've recognized that a tried and tested piece of work needs to be reviewed or undertaken. What did you do about it? Communicating. How have you, think of an occasion where you've been under pressure to respond quickly. Taking personal responsibility. You can see there. So hopefully you'll get these things after. These are all questions that have been asked, none of which necessarily need to be library questions, but you are obviously thinking through with your experience and with your knowledge. So what are they looking for? Right, they are not looking for hypotheticals. And that's where someone who's not been working for somewhere where you do competency misses out. So you're giving them that question and you'll spot the words, tell us about a time. Can you talk about? What we're actually asking for is real examples where you are showing what you've done, not what you would do, right? So don't get into the hypothetical. If I had a chance to do this, I would do that. No, I haven't done that, but I would do. Don't do it. Now, it did take me a long, long time. So when you're practicing, you are saying, this is what I have done. They want to know that you've undertaken the projects, the pieces of work. They want to know that you've completed them. So always try and use an example. This was one I didn't know about till about 7 or 8 years ago. Always use a piece of work that is now finished and complete. So you might be on the most exciting project in your life at the moment, right? But you're only halfway through. And what we've been advised is do not use that, because what they want to know is that you are able to start to finish, to see things through, and that you've then reflected on what you've done. So I would get really enthusiastic and talk about something that I was in the middle of, and I've got these partners and I've done this and I've worked with and all of that kind of stuff. And I now realize that when I was doing that, they were not able to tick all those boxes for me because it was not showing how I had finished and reflected on things. So just be aware of that. And they're looking for your evidence of your involvement. So don't say, well, our team got this to do and our team did this. Make sure that you actually say what your involvement was and how you completed things. So again, that's showing that you were really involved and that you had a role in that. So again, they're just not you would do, it's what you did do. And then also how you reflected on that. So I think that's really probably the most important thing that I can tell you. Now, what can happen in this interview? So for example, you could get a question about a challenging service user, and you actually may not have had an individual that is that bad. You've maybe got 2 or 3 examples of you had someone who kicked off, you had someone who got themselves very upset, had a meltdown. You've got somebody who, you know, so you might actually not have a strong example. So it's very likely that you're going to get a dealing with a challenging customer question, in which case your preparation is to actually merge those three experiences into an experience so that you can talk about, because they're not interested that you did three, and you're not going to describe three little interactions. You are going to describe one customer who, thank God, you're not going to get very often because it hasn't happened to most people, who basically has thrown the book at you. And therefore, you're then describing how you dealt with those things. So if you say, well, I've never actually had a customer that's that bad. Oh, I suppose I once had to do. You are not allowing them to tick the boxes. So that does almost seem like being a bit economical with the truth, but what you're doing is you're merging your experiences with 2 or 3 members of staff, if it's a staff question, or 2 or 3 customers, and you're giving it as a prepared answer about your challenging customer you're working with staff. So just be aware of that. And then the worst thing is you've already given a good example, and then the next question comes up, and actually you could better showcase the one that they've just asked you now. So you can use the same example for 2 questions. Just make sure, think through all of those things, that, you know, the teamwork and showing responsibility. Think what it is that you're answering. Also, what happens if they do ask you something which you really have not done? Now, for me, this one came up when I was going for really quite a senior job, and they were asking me about a time that I had difficulty in dealing with the union. And I was a union rep when I was on the floor working. In fact, I was a senior steward. I had never ever had any problems as a manager with the unions, because I always got them involved at the right time, and I always had excellent relationships with them. And when I said that to them, they were not able to tick their box. I actually had to think through, and it took me a while to realize. It took me to interview 3 of saying that I had actually had a fantastic relationship, that I understood working with unions. I always got them involved, because what I was not saying was that I had dealt with an issue. So by that, the next time, and I knew that this was wrong, I'm actually saying, well, do you know what? There was a time, and I'm thinking of an individual case, or you're thinking of something. So please don't think if it hasn't happened to you. In a way, think of these things, because you are going to have to come up with something, and it's an illustration really of what they're looking for. The other thing is, if you have an example and it's not recent, do not say, oh, this is an example, but actually it's from 10 years ago. That instantly puts people off that it's an old example. But if you don't tell them that it was 10 years ago, how are they going to know it was 10 years ago? So if you've got a fantastic example, which is still really relevant, just give it. Do not say I'm digging around in my past here or whatever. Try and just make sure you've got that. So what I would do is prepare at least 6 or 7 scenarios. So times that you think that you've really shown some of these things. So times when you have dealt with a challenging customer, when you take a lead role and what happened in that. And so actually think of those things and prepare them, and you could use them for a number of responses. Be really creative with your answers. As I say, merge things together so that you are giving that whole skill set. With management roles, so they're asking you those other questions about political sensitivity, or they're asking you, and you've actually never managed people before, or you've not managed at that level, you're going to have to think about that. So if you've not managed people, then think about volunteers. How have you managed? Have you managed volunteers? Were you in another job role? Or is it just about showing your leadership within a project? So make sure that you can think that through and don't just get stumped by it. Really obvious, make sure that you're wearing something that is comfortable, but also makes you feel really confident. I mean, there's nothing worse. I mean, I've done this, the too tight trouser suit that I had borrowed from somebody else. and also the heels that I'd borrowed from somebody else. I could barely walk into the interview rooms. I mean, these are going back to some of my very first interviews, but just warning, something that is really comfortable and that you feel confident in and that you can get yourself, you know, across. And also, please get someone you trust to do a mock interview with you, using some of these things that I have told you that to get you into the answer. And there, 20 times, I mean, I probably have not done it 20 times, but I've done it with colleagues and I've done it with friends and family, and it definitely is the best way, and then sorting out in your brain what you're going to do. So you've got to the interview, you're in the interview, please be really, really careful. I mean, people have the most awful nervous tics and they don't realize that they're doing it. I had a beard rubber one time and he was directly opposite me. And as he was rubbing the beard, the flakes of the beard dandruff were dropping onto the table in front of me. You're just thinking, oh my God, you know, and you get the hair flickers and, you know, please, it's very difficult, but maybe just keep your hands to yourself, because it is easy if you do have any of these nervous things to do it. You can take in most interviews, you can take in brief notes, and I mean brief notes. So something that will remind you that I want to talk about that teamwork, or I want to talk about that partnership. Do not read off, do not take notes and read them off. You've got it there to remind you that there's something that you want to get across to them, and if you don't have a chance, say it at the end. Always make sure that you've understood the question properly. I've asked someone something and then they start to answer it, and 3 or 4 minutes in, I realize that they've taken a word out of what I've asked them, and they're heading very rapidly down a path that is not going to be able to tick the boxes, and I actually kind of rein them in and pull them back from there, but I do that because I know that people struggle with interviews. So other people might just let them go and say, do you know what, they didn't meet any of the criteria because they picked up the question wrong. So please, please check that you've understood the question before you start. Maybe even repeat it back. So what you're asking me is, and say that. I'm a bit of a waffler. I'm probably waffling on here, guys. So what I now say is I'm telling them about this time that I've done this amazing thing and what was going on and everything else. And then I suddenly think to myself, my God, I've been waffling for quite some time here. And at that point, and I think I've actually got those, I actually say, have I given you enough? Is that enough? Do you need any more information? And I'll actually say that so that, you know, they can say, yes, actually that, you know, I've got. So basically I'll do that. I'll say that to people when they're going, actually, do you know what, you've given me enough just now. So just be aware of that. If you're being asked subsidiary questions, so the questions come, tell us about this. And then someone says, but can you tell me exactly how that happened? Or how did you? That is a subsidiary question. They're asking that because you are not giving them what they need and they're throwing you a lifeline. So be very, very careful if someone's saying that, you know. And I don't, if someone is really having an absolutely terrible interview and it's not going well, to be honest, I don't even throw them a lifeline, because actually I know that, you know, if someone is having a really good interview and suddenly they've gone off slightly and they're not giving me what I want, I will give that subsidiary question. So just be aware, if you start getting subsidiary questions, then there's something maybe extra that you need to put in. But also be absolutely ready for when they say, is there anything that you would like to ask us? By that time, you're so relieved sometimes that you actually just think, oh my God, I can't say anything because you've said the whole thing and all the rest of it. But, you know, it's definitely worth having that question up your sleeve. It looks like you haven't prepared if you don't have a question, but be very careful. You can be off guard. And some people honestly come up with stuff that sounds, you know, banal or really self-interested, or, well, I want to know what the budget is. I mean, I've actually had people say, well, if it's not, you know, if I'm not going to get a decent enough budget, I don't know if I'll come. And you're thinking, oh my God, you're telling me that right at the end of an interview. So just be very careful, have something that is sensible to ask, but that you're not then getting into a whole other thing. And if you do feel that you've missed something, so you feel that there's something you really need to tell, so you think in that question, which was about working with others, I missed that bit, and you really feel it's important, then when you're asked that, say, listen, I didn't feel I got to showcase a bit about how I have done X. I mean, do not go into reams, but just say, can I tell you about short, sharp, concise, and do that? Okay, so this is the takeaways for you. Be absolutely prepared. There is loads of preparation that you can do, best of which is to find someone who will do a mock interview with you and who's ready and prepared and understands. Have confidence that you can do the job. They're not interviewing if they don't think that you can. So you're there, you can get that job, you just need to prove it. If you need more thinking time when someone asks you a question, just say, listen, I need to think about that. Can you give me a minute or two? And make sure you leave the interview knowing when you're hearing back. I would not be phoning saying, oh, I've not heard. I would always just then wait, but make sure that you do know that. So that is my absolute whistle-stop tour of interviews, particularly competency interviews. And I'm more than willing, if anyone wants to talk through anything or chat or whatever about, then I'm more or willing to do that with you.
Thank you, Cleo. Thank you so much. That was jam-packed full of brilliant advice, and absolutely concur with all of it. You know, it's some things which I don't, which, you know, I've learned over time as well, which I think have been very much reflected in that. But definitely that aspect of the application and interview being very separate things, and no matter what you put in the application, if you've got the interview, treat it as a fresh start. Assume that they don't remember anything from the application, and make sure you get everything out there. And also, I think if anyone isn't keeping an eye on the chat, then do have a look through. There's a lot of people sharing their own tips and stuff that they've picked up over time, and there's some absolutely brilliant ones in there. So please do have a look over that. We'll share the chat at the end of this if that's okay with people, and share some of the tips as well, because they're really useful. Now we are slightly over time, so Claire, I'm sorry, we might not do. If anyone's got a burning question, stick it in now. But other than that, you know, if anyone has any kind of follow-up questions, either for Kirsten about the SNPC or about Claire's interview tips, then please do email myself, and I can pass them on and get an answer for you. But we are going to go to a break just now, if that's okay. So can I just say, thank you so much, Cleo. Thank you so much for doing that. And can we all just show our appreciation in whatever way you can, please, for Cleo. We really appreciate your time on that. And also, Kirsten, thank you for your excellent presentation as well. Okay, now we're going to give everyone a bit of screen time to either have a cup of tea, relax, or read about another Prime Minister departing during a CILIP event. It seems to happen whenever we've got a big event. So we will come back at past. So we'll start back at 2:30. So go and get a cup of tea for 20 minutes or do it, whatever you need to do. And Cleo, thank you again for joining us. I know you can't stay after this either. So just thank you, and enjoy your leaving and the rest of your day.
Great, thank you, Sean, and welcome back, everyone. We have a real treat in store for you as we begin part 2 of our autumn gathering. So I'm sure I speak for many of you when I say that on first entering the sector, I really had no idea of the breadth, the depth, the range of career opportunities that are out there. And it was such an enriching surprise to realise all that library and information work can encompass. So that is the focus of our next session. We're joined by 4 emerging leaders of the sector, Luca, Karen, Elena and Alison, whose list careers so far have taken them in exciting and often unexpected directions. So they're going to begin by each quickly introducing who they are and their professional journeys so far, and then we'll delve into a panel discussion about the ways in which their experiences have shed light on opportunities that you might not quite have realised are out there. I know I certainly hadn't. So please continue to keep posting in the chat as and when questions occur to you. We'll cover as many as we can as part of our discussion. But without further ado, Luca, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Let me share the screen very briefly. There we are. Can you all see the screen all right? Yeah, cool. So I am Luca, and I'm the Sheriff Courts Library Service Manager at the Sheriff Courts and Tribunal Service Library Services, which is quite a mouthful, but I think you got what I mean. And I'll just tell you very briefly what I'm going to cover in this presentation. I'll introduce the library service, the department where I work, and a very short biography, what I did, how I get there, I go to where I am right now. And the few skills, well, I'm gonna cover some of the skills I use in my current position. And just to make you aware, there's gonna be a quick quiz during the presentation as well. I'm gonna ask you 5 questions. And if you take a note of the answers, I'm gonna tell you the answers at the end of it. And at the very end of the presentation, I'm gonna also show you a couple of transferable skills and some hot tips on how to get into a job you might like or you might not know about. And this is going to take me roughly 10 minutes. So Kristen, if I go over, just please let me know, okay? But should be fine, I've tried that. So this is where I work. Well, this is where I work. The organization, the bigger organization is the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service. My department is the Library Services. And we have two different branches inside the Library Services, and the Sheriff Courts Library and the Supreme Courts Library. I'm the manager of the Sheriff Courts Library together with the Research Librarian. And the Supreme Courts Library, it's the same structure. The Library Service is run by the head of the Library Services, which I think is also in the group today. What I want to say, what we've got in this job, the department where I work, it's quite old. It has basically my same age. I'm from 1985, and the Supreme Court's Library has been funded in 1985. But the Supreme Court of Scotland started in 1534, and books were bought since then. So you can imagine the first librarian had quite a big job to deal with. And the Sheriff Courts Library, it's a very, very recent department, if we want to say so. It's funded in 2017. A lot of work has happened in these years, and it was quite difficult and challenging work for the librarians that were here before me. And I thank them for all the hard work, because they made my life much easier now, even if there is still a lot that we're trying to get our heads around. First of all, how many libraries is this is the first question of the quiz I'm going to ask. How many libraries is the SCTS Library Services team responsible for? A, it's 3, B, it's 44, C, 39, and D, 6. Just take a note. I'm going to mention it as well later on, but if you want to play this quiz as well, there is no prizes, if not the pleasure to have got all the answers right. So I am the Sheriff Courts Library Service Manager. I told you that already. I did an undergraduate degree in media and communication back in Italy, and then a postgraduate degree in Japanese language and literary translation. And when I was doing the postgraduate degree, I also did I was a civil servant of the Library of Oriental Studies, where I was doing my master. And I did a short research fellowship, then decided to move in UK because I thought the situation was much better job-wise. And I quite enjoyed it. At the beginning, I didn't have a proper qualification to work in libraries, and I couldn't find any job related to my previous degrees. So I just work in hospitality, and I did actually learn a lot of the skills that I still use right now during my hospitality job. But I'll touch that later on. And in 2017, with the money I saved with hospitality, a little help as well from my family, I did the Master Science Information Library Studies at Strathclyde. And I really, really enjoyed that. A lot of skill, a lot of good people. Some of them are still my friends right now. And I started working in school libraries straight away, even before giving my dissertation. And it was great, a great experience. And I moved around Scotland, working in different school libraries around Scotland. And in 2019, I ended up in the position I am right now. And it was just by chance. I wasn't expecting to become a legal librarian, and I am enjoying it so far. Has a lot of challenges, but a lot of gratification when you get to overcome the challenges. These are all the things that we do in any special library, really, but in particular in our own department. I'm going to touch 3 of them, which are the one in purple, very briefly. But as you can see, there is a lot to cover. And as I've said already, it's only 2 people in the job, 5 people in the team. It is hard. It is also very rewarding, though. So this is one of the things we do, site management. We have sites all around Scotland. The Sheriff Coast Library is responsible for 29 of them. And there is a lot to be done. We try to go there as much as we can. There has been only one problem, that 5 years after I started, a pandemic happened. So library visits was not something we could do. And we're just starting now, and there is a lot still that needs to be done. It's challenging, as I said. It's fine. This is one of the libraries that we manage. It's one of the best one we have, very fully furnished. And you can see there are some realia here that are not really part of the collection, but we keep an eye on them because we feel like we're responsible for it. We mainly manage all the textbooks and loose leaves and other materials that are for our users. Now I'm moving on to the next point, the next skill, but before we move on, quiz round 2, it's a disaster. We had to deal with the damage in Livingston Sheriff Court. The roof came off, the collection was damaged by water. There was, I think, the 6 months in my job. And do you remember in March 2020? I think it's a bit too far now in the past. There was a big storm. What was its name? Was it A, Brendan, B, Kiara, C, Dennis, or D, Ellen? Just 2 seconds there. And yeah, a lot of things happened. As you can see here, I think this happened during the weekend. So people went there, tried to fix things as they were possible. A lot of buckets, plastic milk pot, keeping a roof thing not falling off the shelves. Some books were damaged. In the end, we fixed everything, but it was not one of the things I was expecting at the beginning of the pandemic. We managed to do it. It was great. And yeah, a lot of memories of that. But yeah, it's all sorted. It's all good. The books weren't that much. We managed to fix them all. Another thing that we have to deal with sometimes is critters. Round 3 of the quiz again. Look what we've got there. We sometimes inherit interesting materials from all the various codes. And sometimes in these materials, there are also inhabitants, like the one that's pictured here in the slide. Do you know, or do you want to guess what's the little critter name? It's Mark, A, B, vine weevil, C, carpet beetle, or D, bread beetle. It's quite cute. They were unfortunately all deceased when they came in, or maybe fortunately because they cause a lot of damage because they eat the glue off the spine and the books are not preserved correctly. But yeah, move on. Special collection. This is from the Parliament House Supreme Court's Library Special Collection. These are part of a very interesting case, but I cannot tell you much about it because it will take probably a full hour. But there are a lot of information that I can pass on to Kristen to pass on to anyone that's interested as well. There is a video on YouTube that my line manager also prepared and should be available there. But I'll check that with you and then maybe pass it on. So yeah, a lot of interesting things in our special collection, as you can imagine. And since we're moving on, it's close to Halloween. I thought the 4th round of the quiz is going to be costs. So Aberdeen Sheriff Court Mecca Gate building, the staff there report feeling taps on their shoulders, hearing voices, callings, and doors open when there is no one on site. Can you guess what was Mercat Gate building before being a sheriff court then? Was a bank, an abattoir, B, C, a hotel, or D, an asylum? And let's move on. As I said, very old organization, a lot of collection, a lot of materials, and some of the things that we also have or see in our day-to-day, well, not in our day-to-day, luckily, but when we go and see our collections, that is a lot of old materials like floppy disk, or maybe old edition of law books, or video cassettes, or slides, projector slides. This is things that we have to learn ourselves first how to preserve. It's not something that any on the team actually knew how to deal with. So we have to learn how to actually preserve them, care for them, or if it's worth to digitize them and how to do it. So even if you're in a job, sometimes you really need to look for other occasions for you to learn how to do things that you might encounter unexpectedly, like floppy disk again. And yeah, and now it's weird. Round 5, I'm going to touch upon very briefly on the pandemic. So the quiz, the fifth question is the typewriter in the collection here. You can see a picture. It's again in the Supreme Court's library collection. It came to the forefront in our collection for a particular reason, and I would like you to guess what's the name of the brand. A, it's a virus. B, it's Corona. C, it's Moderna. Or D, it's Oxford Werke. I'll let you guess that. And yeah, the most important thing during the pandemic, as I said, everything was new for me already because I was quite new in the position. So I didn't really have much old ways to change during when I had to adapt to the new way of working from home, etc. The most important things to do was communicating with our users, asking for help from the suppliers. They were very, very grateful. I'm very grateful for all the help they provided us. There was a lot that we had to catch up on because we had to suspend all the deliveries, and when we had to resume them, there was like a very big backlog. So there was quite a thing to behold, but we got through there. These are the answers for all of the quiz. So the entirety of the department deals with 44 libraries. The storm was Dennis, so answer C. The name of the critter was C, carpet beetle, and the Market Gate Aberdeen court was a bank, and the typewriter brand was Corona. So working in special libraries, why is it fun? And what might be the challenges that you find? So you usually work in special libraries, might be a very big organization. So you will be the person that people will refer to when they have very specific question about information management or knowledge management. So they will respect you. You will get a lot of rewarding comments usually from them. The job is very interesting, satisfactory, and you will keep on building up on very specialist knowledge. So sometimes it's worth applying for a job, even if there are some things you maybe might not know about, as Cleo said as well in the previous part of the conference. Just do a little bit of research if you can, or if you cannot find anything about the organization, just ask the person they are in the panel, because I'm more than sure that they will be happy to help you in getting to know the organizations better, because it's you applying for the job, or you also you want to be a good fit, but also it's the organization that needs to be good for you. So you need to know what the organization is. So ask always the panel if you can. They're usually very helpful. A little bit of challenge sometimes, yeah. You get a lot of people respect. They think that you're an authoritative figure, but you also have to keep on proving the value. So keep on monitoring what you do, keep on keeping all the stats, books loan maybe, or maybe how many inquiries you do, because we also provide the research service. There's a lot, and you have to keep on proving value constantly. It might be draining, but there is a reward at the end. You have to deal with budget cuts, do more with less, not a lot of people working on, and a lot of people you're working for. Difficult, challenging, but yeah, you do it, you always do it. And you have to talk with management for that. So you have to build relationship inside the organization. Doesn't matter how big it is, you have to find the right people and keep your flag up as high as you can. Yeah, you have to really, really champion for your position. Hot tips, try everything. If you want to get into a sector, have a look, job alerts, look at LinkedIn, look on Google Alerts. You can build an alert there as well for jobs. Try everything as well. Like if you want to do temporary promotions, if you have a chance to do that, a temporary job is a good way to enter in a special library. It will also help growing your network and your skill pool, because you get to know people and people know other people, and they will tell you about other jobs that might be available for you. So try it. Try to join a specialist library group. Like for law libraries, there is a SLG, Scottish Law Librarian group, which is great. And also try networking in person or online if you can, like you're doing right now. Get a chance, write something on the chat, ask questions any one of the people in the conference. Go to a conference, ask for bursaries, try it. You get to know people, you get to get known from other people as well, and send an email. if you see that someone is doing a job that you don't know much about it and you would like to know more, or you're curious, or you would like to visit the library, usually librarians are very helpful people and they would like to tell you about what they do every day. So just send an email, The worst that could happen is they don't reply, but maybe it's because they're busy and they will get to you soon. And the last thing, maybe consider CILIPS certifications. It's a good way for you to be committed to improving all the skills, and it will be also valued by a prospective employer. So consider that. There are a lot of degrees. There is plenty of information on the CILIPS website, so just have a look there. Thank you for listening to me talking very randomly to all the things that we do here. I didn't cover not even half of the things that we do, but I thought these were very representative. If you like to contact me, just my email is there, my Twitter handle is there. Just feel free to contact me anytime if you have any other questions. That's the presentation done. So I'll pass it on back to you, Kristen, unless you want to do questions now. Do you want to do them at the end?
Yeah, I think we'll do them at the end actually once
Okay.
we because that was such, thank you Lucas so much, total whistle stop tour of just opening the door and all of it you guys do there, and the drama, the storms, the hauntings. It was incredible. Keep your flag flying up as high as you can. I've written that down. I think that's a good mantra for today. Can we come to Karen next?
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Thanks for that, Luca. That was really interesting. I think I got 2 right in your quiz, so not too bad. I knew what a carpet weevil was, so yeah, not too bad. Okay, I'll try and share my screen now, so just bear with me for a sec. Oops, hang on, sorry. Share screen 2, and then I'm going to. Bear with me. So can everyone see that now? I can't actually see you now, so if you could just shout.
Karen, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So yeah, so for my contribution to this Unexpected Sectors panel, I'm going to talk briefly about scholarly communications. So I'll just start by saying a little bit about myself so that you get some sense of my background and where my interest in this area comes from. So a little bit about me. I, like many in the libraries world, did an undergraduate degree in English literature. I then did a master's in literature in American Studies at Glasgow University. Following that, I then moved down to Brighton in the south coast of England to complete a PhD in American literature at the University of Sussex, and I graduated from that in 2013. And as part of my PhD, I was really fortunate to spend quite a bit of time in New York City. And while I was there, I was undertaking archival research at New York University. And during my time there, I was working in the Tamiment Library, which is a specialist library part of NYU. And I was really greatly assisted by the knowledge and expertise of the librarians there. And I came back to Glasgow just towards the end of my PhD when I was finishing writing it up, and I needed some money. So during that time, I worked part-time in an admin role at the Theatre Royal and King's Theatres in Glasgow. That gave me some really valuable experience in arts administration. And when I finished my PhD, I got a job as administrator in the short courses or continuing learning department at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, where I then worked for several years. And my love of libraries really remained present kind of throughout that period. So I decided to go back to university and complete an MSc in Information and Library Studies at the University of Strathclyde, just a couple of years after Luca, I think. And I graduated from that in 2019. And as Luca said, it was a really great course, provided me with a really kind of solid grounding in lots of different aspects of librarianship and information management. And during my time on the MSc, I completed a work placement with the scholarly publications and research data team at the University of Strathclyde, and that is where I now work. So after graduating from Strathclyde, I kind of immediately got my first fixed-term position as Open Access Support Officer at the University of Worcester down in England. And while I was there, I really greatly expanded my knowledge of all things open access, open research, research support. And for those of you who might not be aware, the University of Worcester is home to the Hive. And it's really interesting place because it's Europe's first fully integrated academic and public library. So it's a really interesting model, and it was a great place to see the library and the research support services that it offers really embedded at the heart of the community. But as much as I enjoyed my time at Worcester, I missed Scotland, and I was very pleased to have the opportunity to return to my native city of Glasgow to take up my present position at Strathclyde. So my current role is Institutional Repository Support Assistant at Strathclyde, and I work as part of the Scholarly Publications and Research Data Management team, which I do think is a bit of a mouthful. So we tend to get referred to as the Open Access team, although what we do does encompass quite a lot more than that. As a whole, our team really plays a key role in scholarly communications support at Strathclyde, which is a very busy research-intensive institution. It's in the top 20 in the UK, so there's a lot of work to be done. So what do I do in my role? Well, the main focus of my work is the institutional repository, which is called Strath Prints. And I make sure that records of publications and data sets are highly accurate and discoverable, that they comply with publisher and research funder open access policies, and that they don't infringe on any copyright permissions or publisher agreements. So on a daily basis, myself and my colleagues within the team liaise with researchers and offer advice and support with depositing, and also how to comply with the different funder, publisher and institutional open access policies. We also promote open access publications and data sets via social media, and this can really help to boost the visibility of the research at Strathclyde. And there's an example here of where we used our Twitter account to promote a publication by a PhD student. And at the time of writing, I think the Strathclyde Open Access Twitter account has over 2,200 followers, so it can really help to kind of boost the impact of an individual researcher's work. So I thought some of you may not be familiar with the term scholarly communications, so thought it could be useful to take a step back and just explain briefly what is meant by this. So the Association of College and Research Libraries defined scholarly communications way back in 2003 as the system through which research and other scholarly writings are created, evaluated for quality, disseminated to the scholarly community, and preserved for future use. The system includes both formal means of communication, such as publication in peer-reviewed journals, and informal channels, such as electronic listservs. So this definition is useful, and it describes scholarly communications in terms of a life cycle, so of creation, evaluation, dissemination, and preservation. This concept of the research life cycle is still in current use today. However, it is almost 20 years since this definition was produced, and really a lot has changed in the intervening period. So firstly, this definition focuses on scholarly writings, but these days, scholarly comms encompasses a much wider range of entities, things like datasets, preprints, registered reports, open educational resources, bibliometrics. The list just goes on and on. So you're probably getting a sense from what I just said that scholarly comms is a really dynamic and quite fast moving area. There are frequent policy developments that can have a significant impact on the scholarly publishing landscape. And additionally, new forms of publishing, some of which I mentioned in the previous slide, are increasingly being adopted by researchers. And then this in turn informs the policy landscape again. So really, I'd say one constant of scholarly comms is that things never really stay still. And in this slide, I've just listed some of the job roles that fall under the umbrella of scholarly communications. And I don't have time here to go into the detail of what each role would involve, but I'm happy to pick that up with anyone following the presentation. 2 of these job roles I've held myself. Others are held by members of the team here at Strathclyde, and others I've seen advertised. And one thing I would emphasise is that scholarly comms is a really growth area of librarianship. as I said, the landscape keeps evolving, so new roles keep emerging to help institutions meet the requirements of policy mandates and provide support to researchers. And as is the case across many different sectors in librarianship, it's really important to have that mix of hard and soft skills to work in scholarly comms. So on the left-hand side of this slide, I've listed some of the technical skills that are often required for roles in this area. And this would include things like knowledge of institutional repositories, research information management systems, metadata standards, knowledge of the open access or open research environment, copyright and licensing is really important, research data management, and metrics and analytics as well. But I would say that soft skills are kind of equally important for working in this area. So things like being adaptable because it's such a fast changing landscape, being an effective communicator, an ability to work with people at all levels, advocacy, negotiation skills, customer service inquiry handling, an aptitude for horizon scanning. As I say, the landscape is quite complex, and really a motivation to kind of keep learning and undertaking continuous professional development. And many roles will also require leadership skills. So yeah, they've got references here, and the slides will be shared, I believe. So check those out. That's me. Thanks very much for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. And I think that sense of reflecting on the hard and soft skills and how they interact, I think that will be relevant to everybody here, whatever area of the sector they are and wherever they aspire to go. So thank you so much. That was utterly inspiring. Elena, can we turn to you next, please?
Yeah, hi. So I'll just start sharing the screen. Right. So can you see it? Can you see everything?
Not yet, I'm afraid. I've got.
All good.
Oh no, not yet.
No.
No, we can't see anything yet, I'm afraid.
All right.
I do have them here. If.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Let's make it things easier.
Yep, they're just loading up.
Oh, wait, sorry, 1 second. Right.
Oh, here.
Can you see?
That's them now. Thank you, Elena.
Oh, good. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Elena Focarti, and I work as an information services librarian at Lanark Library within South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. Now, just a bit about me. I have a master's degree in law from Florence University.
Oh no, Elena, you're frozen. Can you hear us okay? Oh no. Gonna keep my fingers crossed it comes back in a second. Oh, that's such a shame. Elena, are you still with us? Can you? Oh no, I think we might have lost Elena. Oh, what a pity. Oh, well, she'll maybe be able to rejoin us. Alison, could we maybe hand over to you just now then? Thank you. I throwing you in there, but thank you, Alison.
Not a problem. I'll just attempt to share my screen. Is it working?
I don't see anything yet. It's strange. No. It's not behaving today, is it? Again, I do have them here if you need me to do it at this time.
It's probably me, so
we know they did work. We have seen them, haven't we? So
yes. How about that?
Nothing yet, I'm afraid.
Nothing.
That's so odd.
Right.
Shall I bring them up here and then you can tell me when?
That would be great. Thank you.
Right. Can everybody see them? Okay. Great.
I've got far fewer slides than the others, so I apologise about that. Starting off, I'm Alison Leslie. I'm currently a map assistant at the National Library of Scotland, based at the Causeway Side building in Edinburgh. but I worked in a few libraries immediately after I left university. And the first top picture there is Duns Public Library, where I've been going basically all my life. So then it was Galashiels Public Library on the bottom left, and the Old Berwick upon Tweed Library on the bottom right. And then can we move to the second? And these are where I've spent the majority of my working life. In fact, I'm a few weeks short of 23 years at the National Library. I feel incredibly old. So the one on the left is our main building where I've spent most of my career so far, and the one on the right is where I currently am during my second stint at Causeway Side. So move to our third slide, and I can really get going. I don't know whether I was weird or not as a child, but decided at 15-year-old I wanted to be a librarian, and that was it. The school didn't quite know what to do with me, but the school librarian was very happy, so she had a helper there during my lunch times. I was the penultimate year doing the BA Honours Information Library Studies course at Robert Gordon University, and it was during this time I joined CILIP. I've been told by younger colleagues and younger librarians that they're very jealous I had the opportunity to do a 4-year library course. And I thought, actually, yes, we got a very good grounding in it. During my final year, we had Peter Reid, a past president. He was our PhD student, and he actually remembered my class rather. So I don't know whether that was a good or a bad thing. When I left university, all I could still think about was working in a public library. That was, to me, that was what being a librarian was about. I did have spend my placement at university at Grampian Careers in an information management role, and that just really confirmed I was a librarian at heart. That might sound a bit geeky, but that sort of confirmed what I wanted to be. Then when I left university, I was caught in a vicious circle, I suppose you could say. They wanted qualifications and they wanted experience. I had one and not the other. So I was telling the Duns librarian my tale of woe when I went up to borrow books, and they actually suggested writing to the headquarters in Selkirk or Scottish Borders Council and volunteering my services. And then if I got good reports, I would get put on the relief library staff list for the borders. So I actually had a half day in Galashiels paid and a half day in Duns paid. When I was in Galashiels, as a keen new librarian, the chief librarian there thought it would be an idea if I put the local history section into the Dewey classification system. Previously it had been in a unique system. I couldn't do that now, there's no way. But that was good, seeing a far bigger public library than what I was used to. And then Berwick upon Tweed, it was the neighbouring council, Northumberland County Council. I'd never been in the library before, and that was where they got me involved in the sort of extra services like the housebound services. I would phone the people of the housebound service, or I would write them a letter, what would they like, in doing that. And then also, it's a bit terrifying at first, helping with the schools visit. But again, it was good experience, and it opened me up to far more than I'd experienced in Duns. And then in November 1999, I came to the National Library of Scotland, where I've been ever since. Now, not much has changed as far as I can see in the job markets. I started on a temporary contract, and I found that that's still quite common. My initial contract was extended in early 2000, but at that time I was needing stability and I was wanting to put down roots. So like a lot of people have said, apply, just keep applying for jobs. And then I eventually got a permanent post in what was the legal deposit cataloguing unit. So that was my first stint in Causeway Side. I'm positive I drove the colleague who taught me how to catalogue round the bend at times. I'm not a full-time cataloguer. As part of a wider job, having cataloguing once a week or something, that would be fine. But again, valuable skills. I can still interpret catalogue records that my colleagues who haven't had the range of experience have had. They come to me to this day. But I'm still hankering after working with the public. So I was successful with the move to the Reference Services Department in 2004. And this was when I was beginning to get more involved in the East Branch. First of all, I would just slip in at the back of events and then slip out again. I was doing my chartership and it's like, you'll have to get more involved. So I joined the East Branch Committee, and that was one of the best things I've ever done. This supported me through the charterships, and we support each other through the highs and the lows of our careers, and there will be both. It's just, that's life. And some of my colleagues maybe looked on me as a bit of an oddity because I wanted to get on. I had my library qualifications, and I was actually told by someone that you don't volunteer, you wait to be asked, and that validates you. I still don't understand it, and it's like, no, you can volunteer, you might not get it, but it shows you're interested, and you might not get what you volunteered for, but you might get to do something similar. So don't be afraid to ask, to volunteer, to show interest in what other people are doing. Otherwise, how is anybody around you going to know? So that's something. In 2008, I chartered, and apparently it was a very auspicious date in the Chinese calendar because it was the 8th of the 8th, 2008. It did take me 2 attempts to pass the chartership, and that's a turn. I was really down the field at the first time. When I looked back, I thought, I can see why. So again, it's learning to turn negatives into positives, and taking a lot from it. So I was really pleased when I finally chartered. But then working in the same department, I was thinking I was needing a change of scene. And then again, somebody mentioned taking temporary jobs. This was within the National Library of Scotland, so I didn't need to resign. I was guaranteed a permanent post somewhere in the library when the contract ended. So I was an acquisitions librarian for a few months, and I loved that. It was really interesting. At that time, we were focusing a lot on getting early editions of the Dandy and the Beano. So I mean, that was really good. And again, it showed me a different side to the profession. But again, I was like, no, I like working with the public. But I missed, when I went back to reference services, I missed working more in depth with the collections, which then takes me on to my current role. Totally unexpected. To this day, I will say, if you told me I'd be working in maps, I would have told you not to be silly. Didn't do geography after second year at high school. No real interest in it. Then I thought, I'm a librarian, it's not about knowing about the subject necessarily, it's about knowing how to find things, making things accessible. I started off in maps purely as a way of earning money to go to South Africa on a 3-week holiday. They were looking for extra Saturday people. And after a few Saturdays, they thought, oh, she's a bit interested. So I got basic tasks to do. And I already had done some work in acquisitions for one of the curators. So he knew what I could do as well. And somebody retired, I applied for their job. I didn't get it, but I did get the opportunity to job share between MAPS and reference services, because the person already in a job share post got the permanent post. And it was hard doing two different jobs. Really have to be organised so you're not leaving anything undone for the days that you're not in the post. And I got more and more into the MAPS side of things. And to me, it was a good mix. We got the readers actually coming in off the street, you got the remote inquiries, and best of all, to me, you actually got to work more with the collections, accessioning them, shelf marking them, placing them, helping the curators with their work. And we got some funding through one of the digital projects, our 1/3 digital project. So I was temporary full-time in MAPS. And then when I was offered the full-time, I think the HR person was in stitches because I'd never had anybody wanted to sign a contract so quickly. It's just, I'd found my place. After many years, I'd found where I really felt I belonged. So I kept on the temporary full-time post, and then a colleague retired, and due to me when I had my last interview, I had first refusal of this job. Different institutions might have different guidelines on this, but in the national, if you've had an interview within a certain period of time, you can then be offered a job a similar job without having to go through an interview. So that was a huge boon to me, because I used to get very, very uptight and nervous before interviews. So Cleo's tricks really rang a bell with me, and they put it in the questions. I still to this day go in with an A5 bit of paper with a beautiful eye drawn in the middle of it, complete with eyelashes, and the bullet points round it. And carried on working with MAPS. If you've looked at the MAPS website, maps.nls.uk, and seen our English and Welsh large-scale town plans, I actually listed half of those before they were put online, and that was really fascinating, seeing how places have changed. It's how I'm working with the maps in my job. It's not really about the geological ins and outs, it's about the history, bringing history alive. I think that's where I get a lot of the interest. My main project work at the moment is rationalisation project, so I'm getting to spend lots of time up on the stack floors, which I think Luca and Elena will have seen them, and I'm actually going through the boxes, rearranging them, reboxing things that need reboxing, and retrieving items that we would never put in a box with other items these days. So it's just how things have changed over the years, how we do things like that. In 2020, I actually got the biggest honour of my career so far was when I was awarded honorary CILIPS membership, and that really did mean a lot to me, because I don't look on myself as doing a lot for other people or being a leader. But then, as somebody pointed out, I've got a lot of experience. I'm involved in CILIPS, and one of the reasons that I am involved in CILIPS is to keep me aware and up to date of what's happening in the bigger library world. I think working in a specialist library, it's easy to get your blinkers on and just not look at issues in the wider world. So CILIPS helps me with that. You meet lots of different people, and again, as was brought up in an earlier course, you meet people at conferences, you chat, it's a contact. And just going back to interview tips, well, getting an interview first, I applied for a different job in reference services. didn't even get an interview. And I remember passing one of the HR people by chance in the corridor, and she actually just came up to me. She's a small woman. Why did you not put this in your letter? And I was like, oh, but that's away from work. You can use experiences out of work to help you illustrate things. And I don't have any direct management experience, but I have been head steward at Melrose Rugby Club, worked at the Melrose Sevens, running the volunteer stewards on the Sevens day. I've done that throughout the season. That's management. With large crowds, we have to keep everybody calm. That's valuable experience. So again, it all feeds into library world. I've maybe given a more general overview than the others, but it's just, you know, I've added what's come up during here. But and I'm very happy to give tours of the MAP library, and as long as it's not too often, my managers are very keen on this because it helps spread the word. And I think being in specialist libraries, you have to be able to spread the word, what you do, and get people in. So that's my very sketchy.
That was amazing, Alison. Thank you so much. And I hope people take you up on that very kind offer. If you don't know what...
Please do. I've got tea, coffee and biscuits in my desk at all times.
Oh, so we've just got virtual tea and coffee. So like, definitely that. And such a well-deserved honorary membership as well. It's wonderful to see the role that CILIPS has played in your career throughout, and just that mix between being very intentional about knowing what you want, but also embracing opportunities that were unexpected. It's totally inspiring. So thank you. Eleanor, I think you're back with us. Yay, welcome back. Let me pin you so that we can see you. Now, I think, shall I share your slides for you and we'll see if that works a bit better. Let me just bring them up because you don't want to miss that. I think we are going to be quite tight for questions, everybody. We've just got so much passion in the room. It's wonderful. But certainly we'll share details afterwards. We'll share the slides. If anyone wants to follow up on any of the points, please do. So I'm going to bring up your slides, Eleanor, and I've moved everybody over here just so that you can see. Right. That's us. So whenever you're ready, Eleanor, over to you. Thank you.
Yes. So hi, I'm Elena Focardi, and I work as a librarian at Lanark Library. Now, my job, the job, it was advertised as information services librarian, so I went for it, and I didn't expect there was a lot of local history studies and a lot of archival in it. So just a bit about me very quickly. I have a master's degree in law from the University of Florence in Italy, and I also went to Strathclyde University for the Information and Library Studies course, master's degree. Done a bit of hospitality stuff, and a lot of customer service skills come from that. But yeah, I've done, I was a library assistant at Lanark Library at first, and then I went to the New College Lanarkshire, and then back to Lanark Library. I have Violet, my cat here. She's trying to put her input as well. So very quickly, Lanark Library is one of the 4 main libraries in South Lanarkshire libraries, South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture libraries. We have a lot on all the upper ward of Lanarkshire, so the Clydesdale area, a lot of books, but also a massive collection of postcards, photographs, newspapers, and very old items. Probably the oldest is from 1488. All parish records, so births, marriages, and deaths in microfilm and microfiche, and a lot of archival items as well. And now, caring for, if you can go to the next slide, the skills that I assimilated from the master's degree in Strathclyde, they have been absolutely relevant to do this job, because even if it's no regular librarianship, it's still part, this archival and local studies are still part of the information studies. Information is under the information umbrella. So anything that you learned from organization of knowledge to cataloging to how to find how the algorithm works, you will find that is really, really relevant for archives as well. If you can go to the next slide, thanks. And so obviously there are some differences. For example, in archive, although you have to have some kind of control in the collections that you are acquiring or that they are donating to you, there is not that much weeding. So maybe that's the main difference, I would say. There is still a lot of cataloging to do, and there is still, you still get accession numbers, and you still get like all the rules like copyright and the UK GDPR, you still have to know all this. But if you can go to the next slide, and the next one again, but you're going to have to learn some new things. So the archival cataloging is slightly different from the regular library cataloging, and you might not know very well about conservation and preservation. So these are all things that you will need to learn on the job. And also like the importance of how to keep the environment, the archive environment safe, safe from floods and storms, but also safe from pests. And this is something that you will have to find, for example, a course. I was really, really lucky to get to enter in a course that was delivered by the Scottish Archives and National Records of Scotland. It was just before lockdown, and it was brilliant because it was a condensed course, one-day course, where they were talking about how to digitize also items, how to catalog, obviously, and also like GDPR rules and all these things. So if you manage to get something like that, if you manage to attend something like that, it's really, I would say, it's quite rewarding, and you're going to learn so much. Yes, so very useful. As Luca was saying and Karen was saying, networking is really important, especially when you are in a job. I don't want to say you are dumped in a job, but when you are in a job where you thought you were going to do something, and then they're going to add the things that actually the job is involving are very, very unexpected. Find your network, find the people that are going to help you, find, for example, the relevant bodies that I found was all through the internet. So you get all these useful websites. If we can go to the next slide. So obviously the National Records of Scotland, Scottish Archives, obviously the National Archives as well, they all have guidelines, and they're going to be all very happy to help you. Don't be ashamed, don't worry. We are all in the same boat, I would say. We need to learn. We don't know, we start knowing nothing, and then you're going to build up from there. Other useful contacts. For example, if you are curious about archives, if you go to the next slide, Kirsten, sorry, all these they are very happy to help you. I've been in touch with most of them because obviously I have different items in the collections that I don't know how, I didn't know how to care for them, and then you get to know the environment, you get to know the people, and they're going to help you. To the next slide. Because you might find out that many of your items are not well preserved, or they need some extra care. There are some grants around for conservation, but also, for example, the Town's Web Archiving is very good for digitization. They put a lot of thousands of pounds for towards digitization projects, and then the Heritage Lottery Fund as well, and the Scottish Council on Volunteering. They have a lot of fundings available that can be used for a heritage projects. So the other thing very unexpected was to be one of the 4 professional registration support officers for CILIPS Scotland. This was again very unexpected, but I'm really enjoying it. It's basically the PRSOs. It's a network of all CILIP members that have some kind of professional registration, that they have achieved like a certification, a chartership or fellowship. Now we cover also knowledge management. So if you are struggling with your application, or even if you don't know where to start, just drop us an email. We are from all professions, from all information professions. If you can go to the next slide, and you can find your regional branches as well. So you have it's not only the CILIPS Scotland or CILIP Cymru or Northern Ireland. You will get also in England, there are a few from different, for example, northeast, southeast, London. So all different, depends on where you are. If you want, you can connect directly to the PRSO for your area. If you can go to the next slide, we're going to, we do provide support any level of your professional registration. You can drop us an email again, and we also provide training. You can find everything on the events page on the CILIP website. And if you go to the next, so for example, we have getting started with professional registration, which is really good. We try to do once a month. And then meet with an assessor and PRSO, I think is very good, especially if you were if your application weren't accepted, it wasn't successful. This could give you some good ideas on what an assessor is looking for in an application. Portfolio building, self-explanatory, and obviously the revalidate in the morning, which we should all be doing. Useful contacts is again PRSO email. Just is we are all looking at that email every day, so just drop us an email if you have any question. CILIPS Scotland, obviously, and the CILIPS support team, just in case you have any questions. That's it. Finished.
Amazing, Eleanor. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you were able to join us and share all of that. And again, it's wonderful to see kind of professional registration having an impact in your career, but then you taking that knowledge to help others and inspire people at different stages as well. So thank you so much. We have such enthusiasm. I think we're slightly running over time, but let me just jump into the chat and see. I think we've got quite a few questions. So here's one from Joanne. This is a question for everyone. Do you consider yourselves to be emerging leaders, and are you experiencing any barriers in making the move upwards? That's to everyone in the panel.
I don't see myself as a leader, but I think it's maybe a mind shift. You don't have to be in a formal promoted post or leadership post to be a leader. If somebody comes to you for advice, they must look up to you. But it's, yeah, I was like, my first reaction to being asked to do this was, I'm not a leader. But then somebody had a quiet word in my ear and said, actually, you do have a lot to offer. So I think it's partly mind change with me, because I have been working since the last century in a library.
One way or another, Alison, all of us were in libraries last century, last millennium, Eva, and I'm very glad that person had a word in your ear. It was such a treat to have you here. And that actually speaks to, Julie's added a point that she would love some tips on moving from a non-professional role to a professional role. That she's been in a frontline role for over 12 years and a supervisor for 6, but struggling to move and feeling a bit pigeonholed. That I think that speaks to some of your experiences along the journey as well for all of you, doesn't it?
I always was prepared to sort of start at the bottom and work up, but I then think coming in with a library degree, I'm maybe not the best person to answer that, but there are lots of different ways of moving up. I mean, I know some of my now friends that are librarians, they don't have a library qualification, and they've made it their profession. So if there's a will, there's a way, but probably some days maybe moved about a bit would be better.
Yeah, that's great advice. Eleanor, you were going to come in, Ruby?
Yeah, no, just wanted to say that I was coming from hospitality. I worked in hospitality for 3 years, and it's been that I think that was making it difficult to go and do a library job. But I think that I have a few colleagues that don't have any library degree, any library certification, and they are at the level of community librarians or a high levels, and they're working now as towards their certification or chartership. So if you again, if there is a will, there is a way, as Alison was saying, but yeah, try to get even a job as a library, start with as a library assistant, try to get some experience there, I would say, but I don't know, yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Luca, did you have something to add? I see you're off mute.
I left it on just in case I wanted to, but yeah, if you want to know, I think it's probably a little bit of initiatives, applying to the jobs. I don't feel like there is a little bit of confidence probably involved, some sort of bias that needs to break. That can be quite difficult. Like, I am a very shy person, even maybe it doesn't look like, but I am. And getting to the interview is always stressful. Getting to try something that's new, it doesn't feel like you qualified, it's hard. Read it, try it, and the more you do, the better it comes. So I think whoever's asking for this particular question, I would say just go and do it. Also, always available to chat again. If you want, just send an email. We can have a chat. Like, yeah, I guess it's easier. Yeah, if you just try it multiple times until you get it. Never get discouraged. I know it's hard to say. It's easy to say, but yeah, I would say try it. Sorry.
No, I love it, and that actually echoes Sarah Louise's put in the chat 100%. It's confidence, transferable skills are everywhere, very well put, and I think that echoes the kind of experiences of the panel, all your different directions. I think probably, oh, and also Sean put some wonderful advice in the chat, so we'll make sure that that's saved and that gets shared with attendees afterwards, because there's been such a lot of inspiration. Want to make sure you can access it all at every twist and turn your professional journey makes. I think probably in the interest of time, we might need to wrap it up there, in fact. But it's been such a pleasure. We could obviously chat together all day long and continue learning from each other, and I hope we continue to do that. So we'll share the slides with everyone's contact details. Can you all join me in virtual clapping, real clapping, thanking our panel so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Your passion, your professional enthusiasm, it's a delight to behold and benefit from, and thank you so much for sharing that expertise. I'm sure you'll have a lot of friendly emails in your inbox by the time we wrap up. But yeah, I think in the interest of time, shall I hand over to you now, Sean, for our mentorship section?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to everyone for their input there. And it's so great to see so much conversation on the chat as well, just people sharing their own experience, and it really does show that, you know, this is a, you know, just career development as a whole probably at the moment is a real, not necessarily a challenge, but just something that's on a lot of people's minds, and getting those skills. So it's been great to see that level of engagement. So thank you. And it's given us some ideas as well, I think, about what other events we might plan in the future. I think certainly the need for those kind of skills to more and more people are moving from that, perhaps what you'd call a frontline or one of the entry level roles, to something higher up is happening to a lot of people. So I think that, but there's not necessarily always the training available to do that, and you have to navigate that yourself. So I think we've definitely got a role at CILIP and CILIPS to try and do that. So we will try and do so. Yeah, so what we were going to do in the last part is we if we've got time, Kirsten, I think we've got a mentoring exercise, but I was going to just tell you a little bit about the CILIPS Scotland Career Mentoring Scheme, just to share a bit more about that. I know not everyone here will be based in Scotland, because the nature of Zoom events means that we are possibly speaking to people from wider across the UK. But this is just to share one of the things we're thinking about. You know, it's perhaps if you're part of a network outside of Scotland, it might be something that you would want to consider setting up as well. So I'll tell you a bit about it. Obviously, we have the CILIP mentoring scheme for professional registration. So anyone that doesn't know what that means, that is like chartership or certification, and these qualifications do have a mentor scheme attached, where you have the option of getting a mentor, and that's fantastic and works very well. But we had a lot of feedback, partly because we had a student that was with us last year who wrote up an excellent report and did a survey of students and new professionals who the feedback was that people wanted another form of mentoring or job shadowing that would allow them to get some of those understanding of what else is out there, or just some tips on career development, that they wouldn't necessarily want to do the chartership at the same time. So what we have trialed, and what I've got on the screen here, is our career mentoring and job shadowing schemes. So we set this up as a short-term trial with quite a relatively controlled number of participants to see how it goes. But we're really pleased that we actually got a good response from both mentors and mentees. So it seems to be going well. We'll check in with all the mentors and mentees a little bit further down the line and check how they've been finding it. I know there's some of them are actually on this meeting as well. So will be good to hear how they felt it went. Initially, we thought that job shadowing would be more popular. So that was what we went front and center for. We thought people might just want to, you know, say they wanted to work in map collections or wanted to work in a legal library, and they would go along and spend a couple of hours shadowing somebody. But actually, although we got 1 or 2 applicants for that, what we found is far more people were interested in that more formal mentoring. So we were pleased that we got about 11 or 12 people put themselves forward as mentors, and then we opened it up to mentees. and found that we got roughly about the same. So it proved, you know, what Laura Gormley, who was a student who worked with us, had suggested, that there was a nice demand for this. And all credit to CILIP Ireland. They started a virtual mentoring scheme a little bit before us. So we, although we weren't aware of that at the time we set this up, we were able to borrow a lot of their excellent documents and work that they put into that, and actually gave us something to learn from. So thanks to them. But yeah, so this a career mentoring, we wanted to have a mentoring scheme that allowed people to have a career mentor who would explore careers, setting goals, developing contacts, and identifying resources. We set some recommendations. We said maybe meet once a month, but, you know, basically we wanted to leave it open to the mentor and the mentee to work out what relationship they would want. I think, you know, from my own career, I think I've always thought the need for a mentor is you can clearly see it, but I think it's difficult to just ask someone. If you see someone as having the ability to mentor you, usually you probably hold them in some level of reverence that you might be also slightly intimidated to put that to them and ask them to consider that. So what we hope from this scheme is it gives that permission. It says, look, this set of people have said that they want to be asked, so please go ahead and ask them. But because we had that nice round number, we thought we could just pair people up. We looked for what they'd asked for, and we just paired them up for that this first section of it. So hopefully those people are meeting now and getting a chance. We put a lot of documents into it. We've got confidentiality forms and different things that we ask people to fill in, and that will ensure that people can have those very open conversations. Obviously, Scotland is a relatively small country, so and the profession only has a certain parameters. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes and how people are finding that. What I would say is, if you are based in Scotland and you are a CILIP member, we do have, I think, 3 more spots left for mentees. So if you are considering, you would like to have a mentor, and this has inspired that, then there is a form on the page that Kirsten sent. You know, fill in the form quite quickly, because we do have once those 3 spots are filled, it'll close, and we'll wait until the next year probably, when I'm sure we will run this again. And just a final mention, we do also have the job shadowing scheme. This is a bit smaller. We had less people put themselves forward as people for job shadowing. So we'll see how that goes. But if you are keen on shadowing somebody, then do fill in the form there as well, and we'll try and place you within that as well. So that is everything I think I wanted to say on that. I think I've stopped sharing screen now, have I? Yes, for some reason I've lost everybody, but I think you are there. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions on that if there's time or anyone would like to. But other than that, just yeah, thank you for listening, and I hope you think that scheme might be something useful for you. So now, yeah, so I just checked the chat. I don't think there's any questions, but the links are there. So do have a look and keep an eye on that if you are interested. And thanks to any mentors that are here that have put themselves forward already. Kirsten, have we got time for the mentoring exercise? Are you going to?
We might do. If we do a quick sort of intro to the mentoring exercise, it may be literally 5 minutes, but I think it'll still be worth it. Let me just share my screen quickly yet again. You're going to be sick of this desktop, everyone. But what we thought, to wrap up, it would be fun to kind of show how co-mentoring collaboration can work in practice. So we're not saying at all that the mentorships, they're all like this, but this is just a little activity. It's partly inspired by our wonderful Winspiration speaker from last year, Dr. Adele Patrick at Glasgow Women's Library. She's a real pioneer in co-mentoring. So it's inspired by her insights, as well as just our own careers and kind of what we think should be out there to learn from each other. So in a moment, I'm going to pop you into breakout rooms of around 4 or 5. Our students who are watching along, feel free to play along in your rooms. You know, you can do this in pairs or in a slightly larger group. What we're going to ask is for one brave person in the group to describe something at work that you feel excited about. So it could be something that happened recently, something you're excited about in the future. And then what we'd like everyone else in the group to do is mirror back the key themes of that description in your responses. So for example, if I said, I'm really excited about our Emerging Leaders online autumn gathering, Sean might then say to me, oh, it sounds like you're excited to show leadership and you're excited to make a difference, to help people through that project, whatever the details of it might be. So as a group, you'll confirm or clarify that mirroring until you arrive together at exactly why you feel that excitement, that enthusiasm, or the engagement. So that's really what we want to harness through here, is not just knowing what sets you alight as a professional, but why. And therefore, whether it's using your expertise, showing leadership, listening, helping others, whatever it might be. And then you can look at your current role and see, is there anything coming up where you could also find this? You could also show leadership. You could also use your expertise, help others. And of course, a bonus point, this might be pushing it for 5 minutes, but a bonus point if your group discovers a point of possible collaboration. So as I say, it's all about just really understanding what makes you tick and why, and how you can maximize that in whatever your role might be. So I'm going to pause the recording in a moment. We'll open the breakout rooms and we'll probably just take 5 minutes or thereabouts to see how it goes. You can work in your groups together, and then we'll all come back for the final thanks. So I'm going to pause the recording now.
Thanks all. Thanks for taking part in that brief mentoring workshop, but and to give you all a flavour of it, and hopefully that's been helpful. I'm just going to wrap up now. It's 2 minutes to 4. I'm sure everyone wants to finish up now. So just to say a big thank you to everybody for coming along today. Thanks to all of our speakers, Masud, Cleo, all of our panel. Thanks to Kirsten as well for our contribution to SMPC and chairing and pulling the panel together. But thanks to everybody for being so engaged today, for putting so much into the chat. I definitely think there's more to do with these types of events, so we'll be thinking on how we can develop them further. We will send you all the content that we can from it in a follow-up email, and you should get that soon. So keep an eye on your inbox, and if there's anything you want to follow up on today, whether it's to ask us something or to ask any speakers anything, then just get in touch with Kirsten or I or the admin, the email address that Kirsten put up earlier. So thank you all. Thanks for joining us. I hope you have a lovely evening, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks.